In the well over 20 years that I've taught education nationally for Wood Magazine, I get a number of questions around glue. And because glue is an integral part of every project, our friends at Titebond have asked me to cover the most common of those questions. Well, first, these are all PVA glues, polyvinyl acetate glues, and they're meant to glue porous woods. That's what they're designed for. The first one is Titebond Original, and that's this one. The difference is that Titebond Original has an open time of 4 to 6 minutes, and it has assembly time of 10 to 15 minutes. And it's usually used at temperatures over 50 degrees. So here's what that looks like on both poplar and in walnut. This is an interior glue, should not be used out of doors. It just doesn't work well for those. Titebond 2 is a water-based and water-resistant glue, meaning when it's used on outdoor projects, as long as that project gets wet and then dries and wet and dries, this is the perfect glue for it. It can also be used on cutting boards. It is FDA approved, food safe, and that way if a cutting board is going to be washed with warm water, it also won't degrade. It has an open time of 3 to 5 minutes and an assembly time of 10 to 15 minutes or so. It has a slightly different coloration to it. And there we are again on poplar and then on walnut. And this glue is usually used at temperatures above 55 degrees. Now you'll notice Titebond Dark. And it's really the same type of glue as Titebond 2. The only difference is a dye has been added to this to make that dried glue just a little bit darker. So the use on darker woods like walnut or maybe cherry may work really well with this slightly darker glue. And this is what it looks like applied to both of those woods. As you can see, it's definitely darker. Titebond 3 is a water-based waterproof glue, meaning that it can get wet over and over and over again and never lose its bond. It can be used both indoors and outdoors. It has an open time of 8 to 10 minutes and an assembly time of 20 to 25 minutes, so plenty of time to take a very convoluted assembly project and make sure that the glue bonds really well to it. This is used in any temperature over about 40 degrees, so even in a cooler shop it works well. And this is what it looks like on those different woods. Now the last one here is a little bit of an outlier. This is quick and thick. It is also a PVA glue, but it works not only with porous woods, but can also work with some semi-porous woods. So fabrics and those kind of things, pottery, that kind of thing besides woodworking. The nice part about this glue is that it's really thick. Here it is on both these woods. It has an open time of 3 to 5 minutes and 10 to 15 for assembly. But here's the part that I like the most about it. Because of its thickness, if I were using this on crown molding, if I were doing a small piece of trim on a cabinet, I can put this glue on in a vertical position, and you'll notice it doesn't move. It makes for a really nice, easy joint to put together without dripping. So let me just really quickly spread this. Again, it's a lot thicker a glue. It has a relatively fast tack time, which means all I've got to do is hold it for a short time, and it will bond well. Still takes, like the rest of these glues, a while before it gets a true cure, but it works really well in the short term. So now, again, there's no dripping here at all. And putting these together, all I need to do is squeeze them and just hold them for a minute or so, and I can let go of that bond. That actually looks pretty good. Again, I'll just hold that for a second. One of the last reasons for choosing a particular glue may be just what the dried glue looks like. So here we have kind of a yellow look for Titebond Original. And it gets a little bit more orange for Titebond 2, and then the dark version is pretty dark. And then here is a brown or more tanned look from Titebond 3, And lastly, we've got a really pretty clear look from the quick and thick glue. So this will kind of give you an idea, depending upon the species of wood you choose, whether or not you want to see a glue line that's got a little bit more matching color with the glue in it, or whether or not you don't care. And this is also what it would look like on a darker wood. So these are your choices. They actually work really well. Each of them has their own value. Each one of them is particular to a project, and woodworkers will find perfect joinery by using any of them. Teaching for as long as I have, and it's been well over 20 years for the magazine and the road, I've gotten a lot of questions on different aspects of woodworking, but every time the magazine comes out with a solid wood glue up for one of their projects, the questions always come, how is it that I glue up a solid wood project and make sure that it's going to stay together? So here's the technique that I use, and it has worked for me forever. I've never had a failure, and I think by following what I'm doing, it will give you a pretty good idea of doing it as well. The first thing is I find that every joint is exactly the same that I make, no matter what type of joint it is. The jointed mating surfaces have to be perfectly machined. That way then, when they go together, they should be perfect. I don't use clamps to try and pull an errant joint together. So if that joint is really split, I don't want to use the clamps to do that. They're plenty strong, they can, but that board is always under tension. With this one machined the way it is, it's going to go together perfectly, and all I do the clamps for is to kind of hold it in that position until the glue sets up. So the first thing is I take my boards and I like to mark them, as you'll see here, to make sure that these two X's, the two seams here, are jointed either on the table saw or on the joiner so that the edges match perfectly. And then I'll finally do the same thing with the O's on the other side of that. I only glue 3 boards at one time because as I'm clamping those, I can, with my finger and thumb, I can control the height of each one of those seams and make that board perfectly flat across the top. And I normally start my clamp on the left, I'll work to the middle, and then finally to this end. And again, your technique may vary, but the idea is the same. So I've got them set up in clamps like this, but I'd like to explain just for a second what it takes to clamp these together. The glue manufacturer suggests that the glue joint for softwoods should be pressed at about 125 psi. And for hardwoods, like this oak, about 175 psi, which sounds like a lot of figures, but it's really not. What it does is it provides a glue line the manufacturer feels is thick enough to provide a perfect bond. Now, I've got them set up in clamps like this, but I just want to show you or give you an idea of what that kind of pressure looks like. So I've got a pressure gauge here, and what I'd first like to do is use a standard hand clamp. This a lot of you have used, and if I put it in here and clamp this down by just using hand pressure, I can generate about 200 psi, which is more pressure than the manufacturer calls for either softwood or hardwood. And now a bar clamp. So there we have over 600 pounds. And again, it's not that those clamps should not be used in this, but they should not be used to that full extent. If I put that large bar clamp in here and I clamp that to 600 psi, these boards will literally bow up. No place else for that stress to go. And that's where we see a lot of woodworkers set a second set of clamps on the top to try and tighten it to push the bow back down. Or they use some spring clips on the side to pull it down. By just using enough pressure to close these joints and see the glue squeeze through, that's plenty of pressure, well within the 125 or 175, that still gives me a perfect joint, but without all that tension. The boards stay dead flat and they'll stay that way forever. So here's how I glue these. Again, each edge is machined to be smooth. I only have to put the glue on one edge. Now I have my choice of all three of these glues, Titebond 3 or 2 or original. All of those will work with this. My choice would be whether or not this will be used outdoors, indoors, whether or not it's going to be moist or wet. Titebond 3 is the closest to me, so I'll use that one. I put enough glue on here, and I'll spread it with my fingers to give a nice glue joint. I really don't find that I have to glue both edges. There is plenty of glue on here, and by using Titebond 3, I have plenty of time to apply glue, put the mating board together with it, and realign those joints, since Titebond 3 affords me at least 25 minutes of setup time and assembly time. So here are my 3 boards, and now here's how the clamps work. The correct amount of pressure will be as soon as these seams close. So as I get my boards close together and align the edges like you see here, there's my first joint. You notice how the glue is squeezing out. All I'm doing is closing that joint. And then finally the third joint. And again, watch the glue squeeze out. Plenty of clamp pressure. Now, you can wait for the glue to dry and use a scraping tool or a chisel to clean those off. I'm not a real big fan of that. I'm always afraid that if I don't catch the glue at the correct time, it may be so strong in that joint it actually picks parts of the wood up and I'll never get that out. So here I'm just going to use a damp rag. You will not hurt the glue joint. None of that glue is going to get in the pores, so it's not going to show up if you try and stain this board. If I had so much glue that it was in a slurry all over, maybe, but not here. And now I can take the glue off the bottom of this board the same way that I did the top. And ultimately I'll follow this up by sanding the board, and that will take any irregularities off. There is a nice, smooth, flat top. A couple of different things to go with this. I can take the clamps off. This is Titebond 3. I can take the clamps off in about 45 minutes with Titebond 3, maybe up to an hour or so. In Titebond 2 or Titebond Original, within a half an hour I can take them off. Even though you've taken the clamps off, it's still not the time to stress this board because it'll take between 6 and 8 hours to develop a full cure. Secondly, wait for a while until you sand those seams. Remember, the water in there, the glue, the liquid, has made those seams slightly swollen. If you sand too early, when the water or glue kind of dries, that moisture comes out and may leave a divot between each one. So give this thing plenty of time to do its correct glue. All I'm trying to do in this project is recreate a good bond that sits together well with relatively minimal pressure. A lot of that comes from one of the earlier techniques in putting joints together, and this is called a rub joint. A little bit of glue is put on the joint and then rubbed and held, and I've got a piece to show you. So if I put just a little bit of glue on here, and I rub this joint together, I'm just going to hold it for a few minutes. You notice that it's just the rubbing and actually finger pressure that's holding it. I'm not going to stand here the whole time, but the idea is in a few minutes, this is going to set up well enough to be left without touching it anymore. But again, it's going to take a few hours before that final cure happens. Now remember, that is a rub joint, very little pressure. That's the same thing I did with this, and that was a few hours ago to give it that full pressure. And now what I want to do is show you how much strength that joint has and how you can trust that glue joint even with such little pressure. So I'll take it up against the edge of the table here. We'll see what happens. This will be as new to me as it is you. Okay, now it broke, and hopefully you'll see this. The joint itself didn't break. It actually pulled up the grain all the way across that. It literally pulled that board apart. So when we talk about the fact that the glue is stronger than the wood, it is. It literally, the glue stayed on there, right here, all the way through here, but literally pulled that board apart. If a rub joint does that well and is that strong with that kind of pressure, which would never happen anyplace else, this joint will never come apart because it has the correct pressure, the correct perfect glue lines, and the correct time for it to sit and cure. There's no issue in gluing together solid wood boards. Works really well. There's no need for dowels or biscuits. This is a great joint. Follow the techniques that I've showed you, and you'll have a perfect flat board that never fails on you. Aside from the questions I get about how well a glue works and which one you should choose, one of the other examples of the questions I get, which a lot of people ask, is how do I know my glue is still good? I've had it for a few years and I'm just not sure it's that good. Well, the answer is fairly straightforward. The first is the manufacturer suggests that you should get at least 2 years of usable life out of a glue from the date of the manufacturer. Now, for the ease of reading here, what I'll do is show you how these glues do their dating, and it's on the tube. The first 2 digits are the year that it was made, the second 2 digits are the month, and the third 2 digits are the day. So that gives you a pretty good idea of when that was made. And again, manufacturer suggests at least 2 years from that date. Typically, you should get 4 to 5 years of usable life out of glue. And if you refrigerate that glue at, say, 40 degrees or so, a small bar refrigerator type thing, you should get up to 10 years on that glue. The only thing that we're recommending is that the glue be kept from freezing at one end and kept from very high temperatures on the other. That will prolong the life of most glues. Now, by freezing, we don't want the glue to freeze, but the manufacturer has already suggested that their glue can withstand up to 5 freeze-thaw cycles and still be good. So freezing, then thawing, then freezing, then thawing. If you find that your glue did freeze, allow it to thaw at room temperature. Once it has a real good agitation of that glue, should be able to make that glue nice and even all the way through the tube, and you'll have no problem with that as well. But anytime you've got a concern about glue and whether or not you feel as though your glue is going to work, just put it on a couple of pieces of wood, clamp that wood together and let it sit for 24 hours to fully cure, and then try and break or test that bond. If the bond works really good, you'll know that most likely the glue that you've got is going to work really well. The second concern we'll sometimes hear is, well, I've got my glue and I've noticed that there's some separation in that glue, that there seems to be a little settling near the bottom, as you see in this glue here, or maybe there's a little bit of separation at the top where there's a line of almost like water at the very top of this. And all these glue products have some viscosity to them. So some of the heavier elements will settle to the bottom, some of the lighter ones up near the top. So the fix to that is just take that container and agitate it. So in this case, we do, again, here's our little line of water in here. If I take this container and I just shake it well, I will have mixed up the sediment that's at the bottom, I will have mixed the top, and now you can see we have one even color all the way through. That glue is going to be fine. So I've got a smaller container here with that same issue. We have a little bit of discoloration at the very top here. And again, all I need to do is agitate this. The color is evening out. And if I put a line of this glue here, You'll see it's coming out here just perfectly. If this were stringy, or if this came out like a gel, this glue is probably no good regardless of the date that's on there. This is a slightly newer glue. Same thing here, we'll put this glue out and you can see the difference between them. And you can tell there's almost none. So the fact is that even though this had some separation or maybe some settling in it, it was just fine because it runs about the same as this newer tube. Lastly, and this is more of a personal thing, if I've spent a lot of time working on a project and probably put an awful lot of money into it besides, I'm not so sure that I'm willing to gamble with the last inch or so of glue at the bottom of this container. I think I'm much better off to just start with a fresh container of glue. That way I know it's going to be perfect. So the goal in this is, as long as your glue agitates well and the color seems consistent all the way through it, and it runs out nicely without being stringy or without being gelled, it most likely is going to be just fine. And again, a quick test will tell you for sure, but in general, you should expect to get, with reasonable care, anywhere from 5 to maybe up to 10 years of glue life in it. It's great stuff. It should work really well for you, but if in doubt, a new container shouldn't be out of the question. I get asked whether or not a standard PVA glue, something like Titebond Original or 2 or 3, can be used when you're gluing up woods that have oils or resins in them. And the answer is yes. This is cedar. It can be used indoors or outdoors, and it has a certain oily resin that can build up on the edges. This is padauk, an exotic wood that has that same issue. So to make those nice and clean, I like to use a little bit of acetone. This is a cleaner. It also dries quickly. So what I like about it is that I can use that to clean the joint, and I don't have to wait a long time before I can put that joint together. So you can see what'll come off. And now we'll let those dry for a second, and it won't take that long. Now the glue for these will depend on how that project is going to be used. In the case of cedar, that could be used indoors or outdoors. So I could use a little bit of Titebond Original if it's indoors, and either Titebond 2 or Titebond 3 if it's going to be used outdoors. On the padauk, I'm just going to guess it's going to be used indoors, so Titebond 2 or Titebond 3 is probably fine, but one would work just as well. So now the goal is, now that they've had a chance to sit for a second, to glue these up. Spread glue on just the one surface. And now tighten these joints. I'll make sure that each one of these fits nicely and put just enough pressure on the clamps to see the joint close and the glue show. And now lastly, wipe the glue off each surface. Once that glue dries, we'll have a permanently bonded board. And again, even though it's an exotic, even though there's oils in it, the edges were cleaned with acetone, and I can use any of these glues to hold it together. This is a perfect project to show that. It's a great answer to a great question on whether or not PVA glues will still work with resinous or oily woods. Most discussions around glue center around how strong the bond is going to be or what type of glue to use in what situation. But what about those times when you want to get glue off? They show up on a project, stain doesn't go over them well, and finishes don't bond well, especially if there's glue behind it. So if you're joining two boards and you know where the seam is, you'll spend a lot of time sanding there and you'll make sure that there's no glue in that seam. But whenever you're putting boards together and you're using glue, many times the glue is on your thumb or it's on your finger and leaves small spots on a project and you don't know where they are, you don't anticipate them there, and when you put a stain or a finish, now is when they show up. So here's a quick tip on how to find those before you decide to stain or put a finish on. I'm just using a little paint thinner or mineral spirits, and I'm going to go over the board And you can see the shiny spots here. There's one here, there's one here, and there's one here, and that's where the glue is. So it'll show up differently on oak and poplar and those kind of things, but you'll kind of get the idea. Now, if you're sanding or scraping, do that over the top of these and then use a little bit more mineral spirits. And keep using it until these spots finally disappear. Now you can be confident that the surface won't be compromised by a little bit of glue that you didn't even know existed. And as long as we're in this glue removing mode, I've got a game changer for you. You've got glue on your clamps, especially these bar clamps. And this glue really compromises the ability of this slide to go past that glue. And I know a lot of woodworkers will use scrapers like this to try and get it off. They just never seem to work that well. And the longer you've got clamps that have been compromised like this, the harder it is to get them off. This involves a little bit of chemistry, but you'll love it. I've made a solution here of 1/3 water, 1/3 vinegar, and 1/3 acetone. And depending upon how much glue is on there and how thick it is, you may have to kind of protect this for a minute. I'm going to use a small little wire brush, and all I'm going to do is put that solution on there. So I just want to wet it down pretty well. And now to keep it on there, because it's going to dry pretty quickly, especially with the acetone, I'm just going to take a little saran wrap like this and wrap that around that spot. And again, depending on how long the glue's been on there and how thick it is, I'm going to let this sit for 15 or 20 minutes or so. So while it's doing its thing, the same process works for clothes. This same mixture needs to just sit on that glue spot. And again, I'm not scraping it with this or anything. And you know when you've got a glue spot, they're nice, hard sections of material. And what I'll do is just let this sit. Over a short period of time, the glue will begin to dissolve, and it may take a little while. You can actually see some of this is coming up already while I do it. All I'm going to do is let this sit again for 10 or 15 minutes, and then I can launder that as normal, and that spot will be gone. Now the caution here is that if you miss this and you try and launder that spot out and put it in the dryer, the heat from the dryer will make this shirt or this apron a very expensive rag. So it sets the glue and it's not going to work. So if you've noticed glue on something, this is the solution to use. So again, it's 1/3 water, vinegar, and acetone. Let's see how we did on the clamp. And again, I put a little bit of that solution on there, added some saran wrap, and watch how this just comes off. This is really a game changer. You can see how well that glue came off of there. It's going to work perfectly on any clamp, and we found out that it also works just as well on fabric. Great idea, a great solution to a problem of getting glue off of something where it's dried. You'll love the fact that you know it. You're going to use this quite often. We've covered a lot of the common questions in this FAQ, but we know that there's a lot to learn about glue. So if you're working on a project that calls for a special glue application and you've got a question about it, just send that comment our way.